And so for this tonight, we will have Marcy Harris, who's a goat breeder and a 4-H volunteer. We building your herd one goat at a time. We will have Ashley Menges, or Ashley Jeffer Sample, however you know her, will be goat judging basics. And then Josh Moore and his daughter will be talking about the 4-H projects available. So we'll just go over some of the rules again. We are recording and this will be posted. It might be a couple of weeks because we got a lot of videos from another workshop that we have to post as well. So couple things. If you're new to this is the webinar format of Zoom. So it is the speakers and panelists are able to interact with cameras and voices. The rest, you have two options. You can either put things in the chat box or you can put your questions for the speakers in the question and answer box. And of course, you just need to do it once because they will be answered when it's appropriate for the speaker or if the question's whatever. We will handle that. And also, so if you're asked about who has goats or how many do you have or whatever, that type of answer would go in the chat box. If you are asking a question related to the seminar or webinars, then it would go in the question and answer box, okay? So answers to questions from the speaker go in the chat. And remember to be polite and respectful. We almost had some problems last time. We need to stay on topic and no gibberish because we've got a lot of people that have come here to learn and we need to keep learning as the top priority. So if there's inappropriate harassing behavior or people are typing gibberish and having too many side conversations in the chat, that will be grounds for removal. So please don't do that. Stay on topic. We got lots of great information. Now, the cool part on this, we still have time to earn and learn the Ag at Home t-shirt. This is a mock-up. You attend 5 or more of these live, then you can earn a free t-shirt. Must attend the live, and from the start, we have the registration lists and even the time spent. So a couple of you were on there several times when you had internet problems last time. We actually see that, so that's kind of cool. After the series, or in a couple of weeks, actually, probably, we will be putting in that order. So if you've earned them at that time, you'll have the choice of size. If you're earning them after the time, then you'll have the choice of what we have for sizes. So anyway, if you check, if your check boxes match the attendance, then we'll send you that shirt. We'll ask you for sizes if you've earned it already. So can't wait for the shirt. That's awesome. Okay, so I think we are going to start with Ashley Menges, correct? Okay, I am not sharing my screen, so you should be able to share it.
Perfect. Okay. And then Betsy, if our other presenter hops in and I need to stop and let her go, just let me know. But okay, everybody. So I'm going to go. My name is Ashley Menges, and I am the 4-H agent in Greenlee County. And I'm just going to do some market goat judging basics. So I'm going to go over some of the basics. If you have any questions, like Betsy said, put it in the question and answer box, and I'll try to get to them all. So when we're looking at goats, these are the priorities that we should keep in mind. And I put them in order of significance, in my opinion. So we're looking for muscle, we're looking for growth. And when we're talking about growth, I like to talk about our skeletal width. We're looking for a goat that's balanced, and we want a goat that has structural correctness. And then of course, because it's a market animal, the whole idea behind raising market animals is that they're going to be butchered and they're going to be eaten. So we're thinking about that last quality being finished because we want to think about those market traits. So first, talking about muscle, these are some of the 4 key areas that I like to look at when judging goats. And I will say that I always find goats to be the most difficult in my opinion, but if you have a goat background, it might come a little bit easier to you. So here are the 4 key areas that I like to look at. So I look at the leg and I look at the center of the leg for thickness. So here are kind of some pictures of some goats. So what I'm talking about in this area is right down here. I'm looking down this leg to see how thick it is there, how much muscle is deposited there. And then also from a rear view, I'm looking at the width between its rear tube. So here we have a picture of 3 different goats from a rear view. And you can see the center leg and the base width. And so here we go from the lightest muscled to the heaviest muscled goat. And you see how this lightest muscled goat, there's not a lot of width there. Same with the base. You know, the muscle in a goat is going to spread those back legs apart. And so right here, we're not seeing any width between those back legs. Here we're seeing a little bit more. And then on our farthest picture is where we're going to see the most width in this center of leg. Also, I'm going to look at its hip. I'm going to look over the top of the goat. Same thing there. Top width is very similar to base width. You want a lot of width when you're looking down the top. And then in market goat classes, you get the opportunity to handle a goat. And just a little tip in this virtual lesson is when you're handling a goat, the top should kind of feel like, I had a judging coach that told me like roll of coins. So the larger the coins, the more muscle there is there when you're handling an animal. And then I'm going to look at the forearm to look for bulging. So these are all muscle areas. So here's an example of the forearm. So on our left, you're going to see kind of a lightly muscled forearm compared to that bulge in the forearm that I'm talking about when you're looking for muscle. And then here's an example of that shape over their rack and their withers area. You're wanting something that's wide and you're wanting something flat that's over the rack, similar to our picture on the right. The picture on the left is a goat that's a lot narrower and steeper. And so this goat is a lot more lightly muscled than our goat on the right. Okay. And so just some muscle terms. I'm not going to get into terms in any other category, but just for those of you who are livestock judges or who are thinking about becoming livestock judges, one of the big components of that is giving a set of reasons. So here are some terms that you would use when talking about the muscle traits. So in a positive light, you would say, you know, the heavy muscled or heaviest muscled goat in the class. The powerful made, the strong, the stout made goat. And then some negative ways that you could talk about muscle would be the weakest top goat. That's like this goat that we saw in this previous slide. This goat on the left is the weaker topped goat in the class. And then you would say, you know, light muscled, the lightest muscled goat in the class. So here's just an idea of some of the broad terms you can use when talking about muscle. Usually, you know, bolder, thicker, stout, powerful, you know, dimension, wider. Those are all very basic terms that you can use when talking about muscle. And a lot of those are interchangeable for all market species. So just some things to think about there. And then on the negative side, you know, I said narrow and flat and shallow, but just some words that you might want to include in your vocabulary when giving a set of reasons. Okay, so the next trait we're going to talk about is growth. And when I think of growth, I think about skeletal width. I'm looking for volume and capacity. So where do we look for there? What we're going to do is we're going to assess from the front and the rear view, and we're going to look for that width. We're going to look for the depth of body and the length of body. So when I'm looking for width, I'm going to look at the base of their chest. So I'm going to look at their chest floor right here and see how wide apart their chest floor is. Another trick that one of my livestock judging coaches had taught me is that sometimes if you look at the stoutness of the skull and the width between their eyes, that sometimes, and width is spelt wrong there, I apologize, right here, but the width between their eyes, that can give you an idea of which one has more skeletal width. Again, that's just a trick. It's not 100% foolproof, but just an idea. If you're really stuck between two and you can't decide, you can use that trick. And so again, when we're looking for width, we're looking through that chest floor, we're looking at their rack, we're looking from their width from the rear. When we're looking at depth, we want to see which goat is the deepest rib, the deepest flanked. And then when we're looking at that length of the goat, we're looking at its body and its hind saddle. So to give some examples of that, Here we're talking about depth. So we're looking at our market goats from a profile view, and you get an idea of which animal is deeper bodied. And we want a deeper bodied market animal, because when you're thinking about deeper bodied, you're thinking about the ability for this animal to grow more, the ability for this animal to put on more pounds. You've got to think about the priority here is we're making an ideal market animal. So we're wanting something that we're going to take to the butcher. And I don't think we will be discussing dairy goats tonight, but we will in the future be having a dairy section. So just keep an eye out for that. Okay. And then here is some examples of when you're looking at that body length. Again, from the profile view, you're going to see a goat on the left that's short-bodied and a goat on the right that's long-bodied. And the same thing here. We're looking for that volume and that capacity. And we're wanting an animal that's going to put on an ideal amount of pounds. So I'm going to want a longer-bodied goat that's deeper-bodied. Okay, the next trait that we're going to talk about is balance. I always, a simple way to think about balance is which is the most attractive goat that when you look at these goats in the ring from a profile view, which is the more attractive, the picture perfect. That's what we're thinking about when we're looking at balance. So we want a goat that's, tall fronted, really like a high neck, off of a smooth shoulder. You want level. Level is a really good, when you think of balance, think of level. I think that that's a really good way to help you no matter what species you're judging, is when you're thinking about balance, we want something that's level. Level top and underline. You want something that blends together smoothly, is very proportional, and more mass in the rear than their front. So just by looking at these two pictures, and you can go ahead and drop this in the chat box. I'm going to pull up in. Which animal or which goat, either the right or the left, would you identify as being a better balanced market animal? So I'm going to wait a little bit. Okay, left, right, wait for a few more in here. So we're wanting the animal that you think is going to look, that's more balanced. Again, just a basic way to think of it is the one that you think is more attractive. Yep. The left. So if I'm judging this class, I think that the left is going to be the better balanced market goat in this class. He is, taller fronted. He has a high neck, comes off of a really smooth shoulder. I think that he's the more attractive goat in this case. And here's an example about what we're talking about with that level back. With goats, in my opinion, sometimes it can be really hard because they're not as easy to tell as other market animals. Again, that's my opinion, because goats is one of the areas that I think is difficult to judge, but everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses. But here's an example of what you're looking for ideally when you're talking about a level top goat versus a weak top goat. And then another example of wanting something like long and level is when you're coming out into this hip area, you want to maintain that length and that levelness. And that's an example on the right. Something that you don't want to see is being really steep out of that rump. And that's an example that's given over here on the left. So again, we don't want a lot of crazy angles. We want that levelness to be maintained throughout the body. And here's another example of a goat that I thought was pretty well balanced. Okay, our next quality that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about structure. And structure is really important for all of our animals. It's important for market animals. It's extremely important for breeding animals and for longevity. But really what structure is you want to think about, mobility and longevity. So if you have a poor structured animal, it's going to have a lot of problems, and its ability to get around is probably not going to be as easy. Its longevity, in your herd isn't gonna be too long. So you want to think about these areas. So you're going to look at a lot of angles of the skeleton. For example, it should be 20-degree angle at the hocks. And then you're going to look, when the goat's on the move, you're going to be looking for the flex that they have. You're going to be looking at these key areas of their hocks and their knees and their top line. and you're going to be looking at their leg positioning. You know, so just some areas, again, you're like feet and pasterns. Sometimes we say like that they're really weak, you know, on their hocks. And those are just areas that you want to be looking at. And I'm going to go ahead and take a small break. I'm going to let Marcy go ahead and take over, and then I'll go ahead and finish up after she's done. So let me.
One thing to mention while you're positioning.
Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, sorry, was that usually when a judge is looking at goats in the ring, they'll pay attention to how they walk and how they move about the arena. And usually you can tell a goat structure by, you know, are they dragging their feet? Are they kicking up dust? You know, obviously the better structured animals tend to be able to travel easier, and you can tell when they're walking.
Okay, so, and we have our other guest speaker who had conferences before this. So we're looking forward to hearing from Marcy, who is a goat breeder and a 4-H volunteer. And do you have some slides? You should be able to share them if you do. You're muted. Okay.
There we go. Yes, I did build a slide. I kind of did it on the quick, so I'm definitely not an expert in this category. But I did build up a little bit for you guys. Let's see.
So the green button that says share, you should be able to share your slides. Down at the, if you scroll your mouse towards the bottom, it has the green share button, share screen. You know, okay, there we go. It's starting to share.
Hey.
Okay.
Now
So
if
if you want to go to your first slide before you hit slideshow, you should be good.
the menu is covering up my top stuff, so.
Okay, if you go down to the bottom, you can see the slide screen. Yeah, to the right, a little more, up. So you see the thing where it says 68%. If you go to the left of that, it looks like a slide screen.
Oh, I do see that. There we go. I'm used to it being at the top. I've always used the start from here. Okay, sorry about that. I haven't done this a lot.
That's okay. That's okay. We are happy to have you here. So
One
building a goat
Is
horde.
Ashley is still pinned as the main video.
Yeah, that's
I think it might. Let's see.
yeah,
Is that
actually right. We'll take care of that in a sec. Okay, Marcy, we turn it over to you. Building a goat herd, please.
Okay. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. We have a small goat production herd, and it's really more of a hobby farm. But we've been learning a lot as we've gone through this. So I just did some of the basics to build a herd. Basically, you would want a buck to 20 to 40 does, depending on whether or not you're doing synchronized breeding or whether you're doing continuous breeding. The more synchronized breeding, you want less does to your buck. If you're continuously breeding year round, just as they come in, you just have them turned out together, then you could go more does to a buck. And then just choosing your bucks and your does, I think Ashley was already hitting on the qualities that you're going to be looking for. But it really just depends on what you are in it for. So if you're in it for just meat production, a lot of those same things do play into it. But I would say the overall thing is you're looking for genetic health, and then those qualities. Whereas if you're really breeding for the shows, then you're looking for those does and the bucks that are going to give you the genetics to produce in the shows. When to breed, basically, again, that's going to depend on the purpose of your production, meat production or show production. Gestation is about 150 days, and then a weaning takes 6 to 8 weeks longer. I like to give them the latter of those two when I can. I feel like it just produces a stronger goat in general. The target weight for show or market is anywhere between 80 to 100 pounds, and that comes in at around 7 to 10 months of age. Especially for the shows, they don't want them usually over the 10 months, and definitely not over a year. You could kind of push the 10 months, but it's really better in that 8 to 9 month range. Some of the important things to note for the nutrition, let's see if I can move that screen. There we go. Just a sufficient source of protein, which they should be getting, whether you have them grazing or you're giving them a protein-rich feed. Just make those requirements need special attention if they are bred or lactating. They're going to really need that nutrition. But what we noticed especially is that they need their mineral blocks. It's really important for them to have free choice to a 50-50 mineral block, because especially when they're bred, you will have issues with leg deformities or not being able to stand right away and things like that if the does were mineral deficient. Preparing for kidding. Basically, you want to avoid or minimize handling of the does about 30 days prior to kidding so that they're not stressing in any way. 5 to 7 days before kidding, it's really a good idea to move them to a protected area. I like to get them away from the bucks because especially younger, more immature bucks can be really rough on your does and can cause them to lose their kids. I had an older buck who was just super gentle, and I could leave him in there all the time and they would drop their kids and they would be fine. But those younger bucks that seem to be more hormone crazy, I don't know, but they're just really rough and they can definitely cause your does to lose their kids. So I like to keep them out of there.
Can I ask a couple questions on this before you move on? So are you saying that basically when they can be together until that 5 to 7 days, or are you saying breed them when you know they're, I was going to say in full because I'm a horse person, when they're pregnant, then you should go ahead and separate them just to protect for the majority of the pregnancy?
No, they can be together all the way up until they're about to kid. They don't seem to bother them or push them or pester them or anything until they're about to kid. And I think they smell it happening. And I don't know if they're smelling the goat's hormones or what's going on, especially those younger goats, those younger bucks will start to get a bit aggressive.
And is just in your picture there, you have them where they are in separate pens but can see each other. Is that adequate? Mm-hmm. You know, they just have to be separated. It's not like they have to be out of sight or whatever.
Most of the time. I've heard of other producers have had more aggressive bucks. I hope that I never end up with that issue. I did pull my buck out one time because I had more does kidding. So it was just easier to pull the buck out instead of the does. And he like really just wanted to beat up my whole pen. Like he was just ramming the barrel in there and just, he was going crazy, but he figured it out eventually. And I noticed that other breeders have done the same thing. They just pull the buck out instead. But this last time I left him alone and pulled my does out and they did great.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyway, that was the next one. Move the, once they kid, or you can move them into a small kidding pen to kid in, or if they do kid in the protected area, like say in the field or the pasture that you put them in, it's a good idea to move them into a more protected pen once they've kidded. It really depends on your predator issues. I know where I'm at, I have a lot of predator issues with coyotes, bobcats, things like that. And literally, especially any of the dog family, they will smell that your doe is going to kid about 2 days before she does, and they will start hanging around. That could be good news or bad news. If you have a guard dog that protects your herd, that's good news, because your guard dog will start to move closer to your doe and just hang around her when she's about 2 days prior to kidding, and that helps you key in on that timeline. But for if you don't have guard dogs, it's a bad case because coyotes will do the same thing. They start smelling that it's about to happen, and they will nab. I think initially they want the afterbirth, but they'll just nab the baby goats as well as soon as they hit the ground, if they have access. So keeping them in a more protected pen is pretty essential depending on where you're at, especially out where I'm at. Kidding process and symptoms, some stuff to watch for. About 4 to 8 hours before giving birth, the doe will become restless, and you'll notice that she's just standing up, laying down, standing up, laying down, walking around. She's really restless, and this is when the cervix begins to dilate and the uterus starts to contract. The water sac will appear as the kid enters the birthing canal, and then it will rupture, and you'll start to see the front feet and head. And then usually with a mature doe, this process would take less than an hour, but with brand new does, it could take longer. I haven't really ever had it last more than an hour, so I haven't seen that happen yet. And we'll talk about what happens if it does in the next slide. But that I've been pretty lucky on, even on my first year does, it's been less than an hour that the kids are on the ground. And then the last stage is the cleaning stage, where the doe will release the afterbirth. So when and how to help. It's not recommended to allow your doe to strain for more than 30 minutes. And you can see the difference between her just being restless and going through the stages and actually straining. So if left unattended and she's really straining, what could happen is the uterus would contract around the kid, and it would suffocate and kill it. And so that you really want to catch that if you see your doe really straining. If the kid is positioned wrong, that would be another time you would want to step in and help out. Basically, a vet would be your best option, but if you're not anywhere near one, you often would have to reach in and help reposition or turn the kid, and probably help pull it out as well. Sometimes the kid is too large for the birth canal and may need help gently pulling. In this case, you still have to be super careful that you're not hurting the doe as you're doing that. So it's a very careful process. And again, it's hopefully a vet could help you with it, but at times that's just what you have to do. And then once the kid goats hit the ground, there's some do's and don'ts there. Definitely don't try to interfere too soon. So definitely let the mom try to bond right away, because if you interfere too soon, it's often hard to get them to bond. But first year breeding does may not know what to do, may not know how to mother the kid, and they may reject it. It's not uncommon in the boar breed. I've only had problems with first year does though. So by second year, I've had really good luck with them. But often I would have to tie up the doe and force her to allow the baby to suckle, and do that several times within a day. And by day 2, they're fine. Also, many of our does will have triplets, and it's not very often that a doe, my does have not been able to adequately nourish 3 babies. And so usually one of them will end up being a bottle baby. If bottle feeding is necessary, the only thing they should have in the first 24 hours is goat colostrum. And so there's a special formula powder for that. And then starting on the second day, you can switch it to the goat milk formula. Like I said, if you're bottle feeding though, if you can help it, try to get the baby on the doe. So that's where you tie her up. Like just this year, I had a first year doe that completely rejected, did not know what to do. She seemed like she wanted to go over there, but she didn't know why. She was a little on the wild side and I was home alone, so I couldn't get her over there by myself. She was out in the pasture when she had it. So I had to get the baby some nourishment right away. So I did start the kid on colostrum. And later that evening, I got some help to bring her into a corral and pin her up, and then put the baby back on her. And eventually she did just fine that way. Being on the doe is just always the best method if you can make it happen. Weaning and etc. Weaning can occur as soon as 6 weeks, but 8 weeks is better. The longer you can leave them on the doe is better, as long as the doe is in good health. If your doe is getting run down, then you can go ahead and wean off sooner so you can get your doe's health back up. Goats can be disbudded by 4 to 10 days old. That means you're going to remove their horns. Basically, they just get a little bit of a button. And when that little bit of a button is showing, you can see in the picture that tool is being used, and it just burns a circle around that bud of a horn, and then it just dies and falls off, and then the goat won't grow horns there. There's some pros and cons for disbudding. Obviously, if they're show animal, if you're wanting to sell them for show, they do have to be disbudded if they're in the market class. I believe some of the shows that do doe class, breeding classes and things like that, they are allowed to have horns in some of the areas. But some of the other benefits is they won't get stuck in your fences. So that's kind of a big deal. But the goats also protect them from predators. The horns protect them. So, and there's other advantages that they talk about as far as staying hydrated and things like that. I don't have personal experience with that, but we do, our goats that are going to stay on our farm, we leave them horned. Just the kids that I know are going to sell for market class, I go ahead and dehorn them. The vaccinations should occur at 6 to 8 weeks, but it's recommended that you do it right before, not directly before, but before weaning, just so that they're not in a stressed form when you're vaccinating them. It just helps them a little bit. And this is part of my little herd. This is their little kidding pin, and I have a watch mule that thinks he's a babysitter. So any other questions that you guys have?
Yeah, hey, so we've got
Marcy?
a couple of questions in the chat, a question and answer here.
Okay.
And so we've got, way back when we had one early on, says, when I'm showing my boar weather in the show ring, what is the desired gait when walking the goat? And what is the most popular right now, chain or leather halter? So we jumped right to showing before you even got started.
Yeah, that's okay. I think I might have to see if Ashley's got some input on that, because I do the farming of them. I don't show them, and I was a swine leader, so it's a little outside of my realm as far as showing them.
Okay, Ashley and Josh?
I can
I
help.
say
Go ahead.
we'll probably have that one, but then after that, I have a question for Marcy.
Okay, go for it, Josh.
Okay, so when you're showing your boar weather in the show ring, the desired gait, it really depends on what the rest of the class is doing. The important thing is that you should, especially if you're not the lead, animal, is that you're keeping up with the rest of the animals in the ring. And if you are the lead animal, you want to be moving at a speed that shows that you're in control of the animal and you're not necessarily being drugged, or you're not having to drag the animal with you. So there's a lot of things that depend upon. Remember when Ashley had talked about the judge looking at structure, how the animal moves and at what speed it moves is going to exhibit what the structure of the animal actually is. So it should be at a comfortable pace that you're comfortable at walking at, and the goat is at ease, and it's the optimal speed, so that way it's moving at the right pace. The second question you asked was about the popularity of the two different styles of showing, whether it's leather halters or or chains. I think the one thing important thing to remember is there's a difference between what's popular in the jackpot circuit and what your county fair or your county will allow. So for example, I know that it's pretty popular for those leather halters, but in Pima County, in my county, we don't allow leather halters in our show, only chains. So popularity wise, leather halters, but you really need to check your county's rules before you make that decision. And it'd be wise to be comfortable with both. It'd be one of those things depending on what those rules are. But I believe there are probably quite a few more advantages to showing your animal with a chain. So it just depends on what the show situation is.
Okay, so Ashley, you're muted. I know, there you go. You had a question?
Yeah, and I know what Josh had answered it in the chat, but I wanted to also ask Marcy because I feel like this fits. She had asked that Heard County Fair is in September, the young lady that's asking the question, and I know that fits really well for what you breed for. So when would you want a goat to be born for those September fairs? When are you usually kidding for September fairs?
Usually January, February. February is the ideal month. January is just tough on them anyway because it's so cold and we often get a snow or something like that. It's really a hard time to kid. And so I've moved most of my kidding into February, and even had my last twins were born on the 7th of March.
Okay, so we also had, I'm going to ask them as they're written, so you may have to translate them or someone may have to further describe. So when do we need to walk a goat for the week? So I'm guessing scheduling for prepping for a show or what?
I'm not sure what.
I'm assuming they're maybe talking about their training.
Go with it.
I'm going to assume it's going to be just like what I taught for swine. I mean, if you put in 30 minutes a day for a lot of time, and then you get closer to the show and you're doing an hour a day, your goat's going to be ready and in shape and ready for show. I would treat it very similar as far as time wise as I did pigs.
Okay, great. And then let's see, can goats live with other animals like horses, lambs, and turkeys?
Yes, they do really well with other animals except mules. So you can see my picture there. I can't let my goats in with mules because mules tend to stomp baby animals. So, sorry, I'm going to run to the charger because I've been on this all day long and it's running out. But they do really well with horses. They actually, especially if you have a solo horse, for some reason, horses like to have a goat friend and vice versa. They do well with sheep. We actually used to run them in the same field with the sheep, but I felt like the sheep were more bullies. And that's why I got rid of my sheep flock, because they wouldn't let them in the shelter. They were very much more dominant than the goats were, and they just kind of kicked them around. So
Wow.
Maybe not. Yeah, maybe not ideal. Right. I would have thought so too, but it didn't work that way.
You know, you always see pictures about goats standing on the hood of a car and things like that. So you wouldn't think that they would be pushed around by sheep. Thanks. Okay, I've been told that sometimes ice water is used to keep a kid's brain from overheating while being disbudded. Is this true?
I've never heard that, and I've watched a lot of YouTube videos to do it way before I started learning how to do it. So
it's just very topical. It's just right at the horn bud. So it's not like it's
right
putting their head in something.
No, and if you do it right, it's about 4 to 5 seconds per horn. So it's not a long period of time. And what you're looking for is a copper ring that forms around the horn. And that's all you need, and it's going to work. Okay.
And so then the next question, is it painful to have disbud them, or is it painful to the goat?
Yes, I'd have to say it is, because they do squeal. Okay.
And so kind of parallel universe, like getting your ears pierced, is something that's good for the goat or wanted for the owner, but short-term pain, long-term gain?
Yeah, and like I said, there's benefits, and then there's definitely cons to it. But it really just depends on if you're gonna need a show goat, it will have to be if it's gonna be in the market class.
Okay, so show goats must have it done just because.
As far as I know, I haven't seen a single market class where you were allowed to have more than 1 inch.
Okay, and I'm gonna guess I can answer this, but why do goats have horns grow after being disbudded? Would that be that it just wasn't done completely or correctly at the time?
Yes.
Okay, see, look, I learned something.
Yeah, if that copper ring didn't really form well around that bud, it can still regrow, or you did it a little too late. It's really important to do it during that gap of time while it's still little and it's just barely poking out. Once it gets bigger and you try to do it, the success rate goes down.
Okay. Hey, so we've got some questions, and I was actually wondering about the mineral blocks too. Are mineral blocks okay, or do we need loose minerals? And I was kind of wondering, with horses and sometimes cattle, you say, okay, the red blocks that are mineral blocks are not adequate to provide the minerals needed. Is that not true for goats? They can get what they need, or is it a special goat block, or?
There's a certain goat mineral block that we get, and the feed stores have them. It's not hard to get. The only thing you have to watch is if you are running your goats with sheep, the sheep cannot have the same mineral blocks because there's minerals in there that the sheep can't have.
Okay, great. And then what about the feed type or quantity, just while we're on the feed side of things?
So I don't feed out the goats with actual goat feed per se. Mine are all natural on pasture.
Okay.
And then we buy grass hays, and that's just how we prefer, because we actually consume our goats as well, and that's the method that we prefer for our consumption.
Okay, excellent. And let's see, if goats are not being bred for show or market, how long would they live?
I think that the last time I read that, it was probably 8 or 9 years. It's not a super long life.
Yeah.
And it may be longer if they're not used for anything, but I think the last time I looked it up, we've actually got a doe that should have been gone for a couple of years. I was surprised.
Okay, yeah, the majority of my goat experiences when we had one that named Herschel that babysat a geriatric stallion and old fat thing, and they both kind of waddled around together, and I don't know, I think he was like 14, but he was pretty ancient.
Yeah, it's probably similar to dogs, but I don't know. For market class and breeding does, I think of the 8 to 9 year olds is kind of maxing out.
Okay, so we also what would be some complications that you might have with debudding a goat? Besides the not doing it right and having the horns grow back, are there any complications that you've run into?
No, that's the main one. I haven't, but I have read that if you do it too long, you can definitely cause damage. So you've really got to do your homework and make sure you're doing it right.
Okay. And then a really good question, what kind of vaccinations are necessary for goats?
So it's a goat. I don't know, I can't remember if it was a 6-way, but it's just a general kind of like, giving your puppy the puppy shots. You just pick it up at the feed store. You start at that 6 to 8 week time frame for their first shots, and then I think it's 2 months. Oh, I can't remember now. It's not.
Ashley, Josh, you guys want to pipe in on this?
Can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah, I just dismissed it here, but it was vaccinations for goats.
Oh, what types?
Yeah.
I don't know of any off the top of my head. Usually we'll just all go and look at the different ones available.
Okay.
I actually don't raise goats, so.
Okay, and so it's always ask your vet if you're not sure, right?
Yeah, there's a specific one for them, and I can't remember the names. It's some complicated things that it protects, but I don't remember the names of them. And we just haven't ever had those in our herd. So we just keep them healthy.
Okay, great. So how do you keep goats from climbing all over the place?
No climb fence.
Good fencing. Okay. And we've got a lot of interest on the debudding factor, because do you put any type of medicine or cream on after debudding?
Not if you do the burn method. You don't need anything.
Okay, if you do it quick, do it right, then
Yeah.
nothing else needed. Perfect.
There's another method. I think they called it spooning. We've never done it because it causes a lot more blood. And I would assume that if you did that, you would have to use that blood clotting powder stuff.
Okay, great, thank you. So at what age would you butcher the goat for human consumption?
About the same as when you're going to take them to the show. Like that 10-month mark they're really a perfect
Okay,
size for that. And some people like them younger than that. And then there's we get people from other countries, like from South Africa and such, that they actually like the larger goats. They like a tougher meat.
okay. Now I'm going to take a break here for the questions. We still have some questions. You can stay with us, right, for a little bit,
Yeah.
Mark? Because
Yeah.
Josh is going to give us some insight on 4-H opportunities, correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to help you unshare your screen. And now Josh, you can share your screen. And
Alright.
we'll do that. And then we'll come back to other questions.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to you, Josh. And I think Ashley Wright will spotlight you.
Perfect. Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Josh Moore. I'm one of the 4-H agents in Pima County, and I'm in charge of all of our livestock programs. And so I didn't raise goats as a 4-H member. I was more of a beef and lamb type person and swine. But over the years in my role as the county extension agent here, I've really gotten to learn a lot about the different goat projects that we offer as 4-H projects throughout the state. And the picture here is of a young lady who's raising a market goat. Primarily, most market goat breeds are going to be your boar goats, which are South African in their origination. But there are tons of other types of goats. Goats were some of the first animals domesticated by humans. And just like how there's different uses for them, they all look different. All breeds have a very specific usage. Earlier in Ashley's presentation, she had a lot of examples of different types of breeds. You'll notice that some of the ones that were probably more example, she was looking at them for a market standpoint, for human consumption. However, goats were bred for different reasons, whether that be for pack animals. There's breeds for that. There's also breeds specifically for dairy, and dairy animals were bred with a purpose specifically for producing milk. And so they usually don't tend to have great market qualities because they were bred in mind with all of the energy that they're consuming to actually go into milk production and not into meat production. And so usually dairy goats, they don't look very appetizing if you're a livestock judge. Same thing with there's a huge market nowadays, even for things like pygmy goats, for things like pets. And I'll talk a little bit more about the different goat projects that we offer. So throughout the state, and specifically in my county, we offer a couple of different projects. Primarily, our largest program is our market goat project, most of the time we're seeing boar goats, whether they be wethers or does. And we like to look at them at about 70 pounds at the fair. That's our minimum weight. We don't have a maximum weight, but 70 pounds is about as small as we want them. So this young man on the right-hand side, I remember he started 4-H several years ago, and he started out with just one boar wether. And over the years that Oren was involved in 4-H, I remember him because he was such a great exhibitor. He got more and more involved, and every year he'd raise a boar, and eventually he started his own breeding project. And this year he tagged in 3 of his own animals that he had bred himself. He had gone from buying them from somebody else to where he grew his project. So it wasn't just raising one market animal. He actually starting a breeding program. And in our county we offer a breeding doe, where we don't allow bucks to come to our county fair, but we do have a doe show. And primarily almost all of our breeding animals are the boar breed. So that's a great opportunity. Pygmy goats, they fall under our small stock category, and I have some pictures later on of different pygmy goats, but that's a great project. We'd offer a breed show, a showmanship show, and it's really kind of cool. Pygmy goats also can do agility, and one of my favorite things to watch at our county fair is the pygmy goat agility contest. And rather than being shown on halters or on chains like you would market animals, they're actually shown on leashes, and they're almost like little dogs, but it's great to see how their personalities are. A fun project, especially if you're not interested in raising a meat animal. They're great companions, and there's a big market for them. As I had mentioned earlier, dairy goats is another option. All counties have the dairy goat project usually, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And in some counties, they do offer a pack goat program. We don't have one, but I know that Santa Cruz County used to have one. And basically, in some countries, they'll utilize goats as a beast of burden, where you can actually transport. And the pack goat project is kind of neat because you can get little saddles for your goat where they can haul things around, and there's usually an agility course. And different breeds do really well. A common pack goat breed would be like the Alpine breed. And so a little bit more, some of the opportunities where if you wanted to get into showing animals, this is an example of a pygmy goat show. These kids are raising pygmy goats there, and they have a national association. It's called the NPGA, National Pygmy Goat Association. And we have a show here in Pima County that's open to everybody across the state. It's called the I Love Pygmy Show, and it's usually in February. It's a great opportunity. We usually get like a national judge, and we'll have adults come and show, and then we'll have a youth show as well. So great opportunity there. But obviously, there's the jackpot show circuit for the market animals. There's the Sela circuit that's pretty common, and as well as there's that Freedom and Liberty circuit that's recently started up, and they have shows frequently. Of course, there's also the opportunity to raise these animals for your county fair and livestock shows there. For dairy goats, there's the ADGA, the American Dairy Goat Association. They have shows, and there's an open circuit as well as like a 4-H circuit. Usually at the Pima County Fair, there's an open show right before our 4-H show, and that lasts about 3 days. So I would recommend taking a look in your area to see what type of dairy goat shows are available. Sometimes FFA chapters will have market goat shows that you can participate in, especially in the Phoenix area. Arizona National Livestock Show has a great market and breeding boar program. And then there's also that opportunity to participate in livestock judging and learn how to judge goats, as well as there's the 4-H skillathon, the livestock skillathon, and usually we have a component that deals with goats there. And there's tons of other national shows. One that if you're interested in watching, going on right now, there's the Oklahoma Youth Expo, and they have a great TikTok. I don't know if you're into TikTok, but if you follow them on TikTok, they always have some cool videos about what they're doing there with their different programs, but I know they do have goats there as well. So different learning opportunities. There's a couple of them. There's the YGB show camp. I should have taken the McPeak one off. They only do beef and sheep, but the YGB one, there's the Arizona Livestock Camp in Holbrook, and that's July 5th through the 8th. One of the things that I always really like to use is Ohio 4-H Goat Resource Handbook. You can just look that up and you can purchase it. It's about $25 online. Really, really great resource for a beginning member. And so this is an example of a dairy goat show. Usually in dairy goat shows, all of the young people will wear all white, as in all dairy projects. And you can see these goats. If you were looking at them from a market standpoint, they wouldn't be very good market goats, but that's because they were bred specifically to produce milk. So there's quite a few differences in breeds. So if you're interested, coming up, we're going in Pima County. Whoops, sorry, I skipped that. We're doing our spring showdown in place of our county fair because that was postponed. And we'll actually live stream all of our shows if you're interested in watching, and you can watch them either on our Facebook or on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, and if you just look up Pima County 4-H on YouTube or Facebook, you'll be able to watch them there. And so our schedule, we'll do the Pygmy Goat Show on Saturday, April 17th, and we'll do that at 11 a.m. We're going to start with showmanship, and then we'll move into a breed show, and then we'll wrap up with an agility course. And that'll all be live stream. Our dairy goat show is that same day starting at 2:00 p.m. We'll start with showmanship, and then we'll move on to a breed show. Our market goat show is April 20th at 2:00 p.m. And after that, we'll follow up with a breeding boar show. And that's about at 3:30 in the afternoon as well. So like I said, all of that will be live streamed. And if you've never raised a goat project, I'd highly recommend that you go to a show and you watch how they go, watch how they're shown. You'll learn about all these different types of breeds and things like that. So watching a show is probably the best way to get started with goats. And that concludes my presentation. So I can help
All
answer.
right, that is excellent. Thank you so much. Changing my view here. There we go. All right, so we've got our speakers here. We have more questions, and let's see the gallery view. There we go. So questions, and I guess it can go to anyone. If you saw Ashley Wright, our livestock agent, area livestock agent, gave you some great information about vaccination. Yeah, let's try again. Vaccination recommendations in the chat. So you can take a look at that and see. We've got some other questions. I'll open it up. You guys can jump for them. We've got do you raise milk production for multi-purpose? So if you're
I think that's a
go ahead.
I think that's a Marcy question, asking if she raises what she raises goats for.
There you go.
I don't do the milk goats yet because I work full time and it would be really difficult. I would love to in my retired life, but I have a friend who does do the milk goats and the meat goats, and she even crosses a few for her own preferences. So.
Okay, and we have a couple of health questions that anyone can hop in here. When should castrations be done, and how often do you worm or deworm a goat?
So the 6 to 8 week time frame is also the best time to castrate. We actually prefer banding. It just seems like it's just a better process. And then I prefer to worm just before breeding. So there's some times that you don't want to worm, and so that's why I worm then, because just after being bred, in that first 30 days, you don't want to worm your goat because it can cause it to abort. And then in that last, I think it's 6 to 8 weeks, again, you don't want to worm just before kidding. So, and I usually just don't while they're lactating, and so just after weaning, before they're going to be bred again, is typically when I worm them. If they need it more often, you can, there's a space in the middle of being bred that's still safe to do it. So if it looks like they need to do it, I'll take advantage of that, but otherwise I really just try to do it before they're bred.
Okay, excellent. And we have just, so you had mentioned, besides the burning of the other ways to disbud a goat, was it like kind of like dehorning cattle type of thing?
It is. It's a similar process. There's like smaller spoons that kind of reach in and grab that. Everything I've read, the burning just seems more humane and less options for any kind of issues. So.
Okay, we got a question. Are boar goats more susceptible to abscesses?
I have not heard that. I have heard, I haven't personally had a single one do that. So if there is a history of that, I don't have an experience with it. I will say that if you're over graining them in the early process, you can mess up their bowel system and they can get plugged up and blocked, and that can cause them problems, but that really just comes from overgraining.
Okay, so too much grain. Josh, you got something to add?
Yeah, one of the things with the cassius lymphoma, I think it's called, oftentimes it passes through, it's genetic. And so sometimes, like, we've had examples where goats will get those abscesses on their sides, which is a sign of the CL. It's usually from the mother. And so it's important that when you're buying an animal, you look for a reputable breeder that has a herd that does not have, that test negative for that.
Okay, see, I was thinking abscesses in the feet because, again, I'm the horse person. So, but okay, and I don't know if maybe any of you, which one of you might want to take this, a little more info on the 50/50 mineral block, because we have someone new to goats.
So it's, I was gonna try to get the actual ingredients because I don't have that memorized. Let me see if I can jog
Okay,
that.
well, we can come back to that while you look that up, and I'll see how much time per week do you spend tending to your goats? Or maybe Ashley Wright is the queen of looking things up, our question wrangler.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would say, and we teach this in quality assurance, that part of raising a 4-H livestock animal is having plenty of time to be able to make daily observations. So however long that takes you every day, you need to be making sure that your animal has access to clean, cool water on a daily basis. And you also want to make sure that it's being fed twice a day. And the only way that you're going to be able to notice differences in health is if you're making those daily observations. If I were to stick in a number to it, I would say you'd probably want to spend anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half with your goat. And if it's longer, that's even better. That gives you more opportunity to make those daily observations. In terms of exercise and training, it's one of those things where the more time you spend with your animal, the better trained that it will be and the better that it will do in the show ring. You can't not pay attention to your animal all year long and then go into the show ring and expect to win grand champion. Goats are stubborn animals. It takes time to train them, and the only way you're going to do that is through regular work with them. Oftentimes, especially with all market animals nowadays, most of the time the muscle development is almost it's the result of a good feeding program and good genetics. The exercising and the movement of the animals is more so for being able to train the animal than it is actually for muscle development most of the time. So that's usually for your benefit. So it's a balance of buying a good animal that has good genetics, using high quality feed and having some consistency and regularity to your feeding program. But at the same time, you want to train that animal to be able to show it well.
All right, great answer. Okay, so did you come up with anything, Marcy, or are we sending it to Ashley Wright to find?
Oh, no. So it's the highest percentage is crude protein, and then you've got crude fat, fiber, calcium, phosphorus, copper, which is, I believe, what the sheep cannot have.
Okay,
Zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D3, iodine, salt, sodium, selenium, and acid. I believe that it's the selenium that is super important right before birth, if I remember right, because that's where the kids are kind of, that they can, if you're low on that selenium, that's where you can get some deformations in their legs and such.
and I think we have a majority of our Arizona soils are pretty low in selenium. Is that right, people, agents? They're all staying muted. Ashley Wright, are you with us still?
Yeah, I'm trying to type stuff in, sorry. Yes, all of our soils and our native forages especially are very deficient in selenium, particularly in the southern areas of the state. We've been doing quite a bit of sampling of forages on some of those, and we've really found significant deficiencies, also in copper as well. Iron, not so much, but for sure copper and selenium, and even in some times zinc and some other things. So having that good quality mineral supplement out, a real mineral supplement, not the silly red trace mineral blocks, a real goat mineral supplement is going to be really critical to making sure they're getting what they need.
Okay, and so I'm guessing that you can stay on, not mute for a sec, because the regularly give goats copper boluses. You would probably prefer them getting it from a proper, appropriate mineral supplement, correct? Post a picture where goats.
Yeah, I'm still looking for one. I realized I was looking on the wrong computer and I can't share from the other computer. So I've got to pull it up on this one. I'll be honest with you, I don't raise goats myself, and so I'm not 100% on the copper bolus thing. Theoretically, they should be getting what they need properly from a real mineral supplement if you're providing a high quality one. But there may be a reason that I don't know for bolusing. I don't know if it's because of a certain thing that goats have. I don't believe so, but I know it's something that's regularly done. So I don't know if Marcy has maybe more to say on if she boluses or not. She's shaking her head, no,
There
she
you go.
doesn't. So I think that as long as you're providing a good quality mineral supplement that includes all of the minerals that are really necessary for goats, you should not need to bolus.
Okay, well, Charlotte wants to know on another subject, do you need to treat for lice regularly?
I personally don't. If I had to, I'd probably go with something natural. But I don't, on my property, I have not had that problem.
Okay,
It-
and, oh, go ahead,
I was-
Josh.
it is common. I've seen it several times where we'll have goats that come into our county fair that have lice problems. I think the biggest thing is preventative, is making sure that you're cleaning your goat pens regularly, making sure you're cleaning your animals regularly. It's really preventative, and there are chemicals to treat it, but I agree that preventative measures are go a long way than having to use like a product like Seven Dust on your animals. The biggest thing is if you are only raising animals for a short period of time at your house, it is a good idea, in between when you have animals and the period where you don't have any animals, is that you treat your pens and facilities with some type of pesticide.
Insecticide, natural or otherwise.
Yes, yes, and there's tons of different ones out there. The biggest thing is an indicator of lice in goats is you tend to notice that usually a healthy goat will have slick hair, and the hair's all moving in one direction. But when I've noticed that when goats have lice, is the hair tends to stick up in that area where they do have lice. So a good way to know that is to how your animal's hair and their coat is moving. Healthy animals should have slick hair that kind of hugs the body. Unhealthy animals tend to have hair that puffs up in one area.
Rough and shaggy and
Yeah.
puffy.
And the only way you notice that is through daily observation. If you're not observing your animals daily, you won't notice. So.
Okay. And we have a great question, especially for people interested. What is a average price for a 4-H goat kid?
Oof.
And so Josephine, our webinar warrior here, said, depends on the breeder, quality doe for 600 to 800. I have a $300 wether now who's gotten reserve champs. Does that sound about right, ladies and gentlemen?
I think I'm way on the low end of this. Mine are going for about 200. And I believe I'm probably the lowest one out there.
Well, now you know.
But I
where to
didn't,
go.
yeah, I didn't get into it for that reason. I got into it for the meat production, and that's just kind of a sidekick that I just help out our 4-H kids with.
Well, we certainly
Which
appreciate that. for
The
sure.
Greenlee County bred and fed grand champion last year. So
Yeah,
Ooh,
and she got the reserve champion overall as well.
all
I
right.
would point out that it's probably, especially if you're just getting into this, I would say it's probably highly irresponsible to go out and spend a lot of money on an animal when you're just learning. It's one of those things where, just like if you were to buy a car, your first car, you probably don't want to go out and buy a Ferrari for something that you're going to learn in. You're going to make mistakes. You're probably going to have some struggles. So I would highly recommend that. I think that $200 price range is probably a really, really good starting point. If you can find a breeder that's willing to be at an affordable price like that, that's a really good opportunity for members to learn off of and to build up their experience. Remember that 4-H is not about winning buckles as much as we might think that. It's about getting a high quality learning experience and learning how to take care of another animal. And it's just, that's a good way, that's a good mindset to have, especially as a new member.
Okay, excellent. And our last question here from tonight, because we are actually over, but I'm certainly glad you guys have so many questions. How do you like to, how do you clean them? Do you give them baths like you do horses, cattle, and other? You brush them? What do you do?
Well, for the show they do, and that's again, that's a little bit outside my expertise. I know my son showed for a while, and he did shampoo them and kept their coat nice, and things like that. And it's kind of like any of your show animals, as long as you keep their coat really nice and shiny and you're using good products, then it's going to be, they're going to look good at the show. It's all going to be basically shaved by the time they get there, but it still affects their skin and everything else, just to keep them clean. But ours, our breeding ones, no, they're out in the pasture, they're out in a natural environment, so.
Okay. And we did have one comment on, Leslie had mentioned copper boluses are not every day. Some brands are one time every 6 months. Okay. So of course that would be using it by the label for copper boluses. And then I think Ashley Wright is probably going to pop the survey link in one more time. And yes. Maybe, because we had a request for that. And then, of course, bathing once a week with degreasing, washing legs. Okay. Best way to protect against ringworm. That's another one that came in. You guys.
I think biosecurity is the number one thing, is to make sure that when you go to a show or an event, is you quarantine your animal for about 30 days afterwards, and you want to avoid places where there are outbreaks of ringworm. Don't when you have people visit your house or facility, don't allow them to touch your animals. I know that it's pretty common to people want to pet your animals, but that people are usually the carriers of ringworm when it comes to that. But isolation and quarantine and biosecurity are all great measures to avoid ringworm.
And don't share your equipment, whether
Yeah.
it's towels or grooming brushes or anything else. That can be the fomite that carries ringworm from one animal to another. And
Sanitize.
also to people.
And please don't take an animal that has ringworm to a show. Yeah, it was actually my second year on the job, and somebody brought an animal that had a ringworm, and I caught ringworm from ear tagging goats. So it was actually lambs. But make sure that if you have an outbreak, you treat it and you do the right thing and you quarantine that animal.
All right, so we have run to the end of the time beyond, but I want to let you know that we have cavies are next on the agenda this time, and is that April 8th, I think? Help me out here, somebody. I was just at
Yes, April 8th.
Okay, and so we have put in the link for the survey. You will also get a reminder email for that. Thank you so much to Marcy and Ashley, Jeff for sample, and Josh for sharing all of their goat notes. and also to Ashley Wright, my question wrangler and lookup person extraordinaire. I'm Dr. Betsy Green. We are finishing off this AZ 4-H Ag at Home goat webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks, Marcy, so much for connecting with us here.